So students, in the last particular part, we had, I think, which was the last particular part that we have done in this contest, students. So that was in respect of part 3. Oh, sorry, the assessment procedure part 1. So in the part 1 of the assessment procedure, students, we had done up till during the pendency of the proceedings, the AO will be collecting the evidence for the purpose of passing the order. Because I have made a reference that the order of 143 or the order of 144, students, has to be passed after taking into account all the materials gathered by the AO. After taking into account all the materials gathered by the AO. So on that note, students, that the order needs to be passed, isn't it? So that is precisely the point. Now, students, in this particular context, now the power to be exercised to collect the materials, can you see this particular point? These are the various sections wherein the power would be collected. Now these are some of the very critical provisions, could be there in your examination also, maybe through a kind of an integrated case study as well, so you have to be a bit careful about these particular points. In the case of 133, students, this is a power which can be exercised by the assessing officer and they can call for any evidence. I'll just briefly first will explain you this and then we are going to read it out, the provision itself. So students, here in 133, the AO can give the notice to any person, and by giving the notice to any person, they can call for any information. This is a very massive sweeping power which is available before the income tax authority. Give the notice and call for any evidence, students. Give the notice and call for any evidence. That is a kind of a power which is there so far as the section is concerned. Now there is one very important point which is this, that if the proceeding is pending, students, like if there is a pendency of the proceedings, that is after the notice. What is pendency of proceedings? After the notice but before the passing of the order. After the notice but before the passing of the order. So if there is a pendency of the proceedings, students, then in the course of the pendency, students, the order can be passed, the evidences can be collected. The evidences, students, can be collected in this context by any person, by any AO, without requiring the approval from the higher authority. So they do not require any approval from the higher authority, students, in this case. That is how they can collect the evidences if the proceedings are pending. But if the proceedings are not pending, and after the completion of the any proceedings or the order, if the AO or the any income tax authority below the rank of the JCIT, if they want to exercise this particular power under 133, then in that case necessarily they will have to then issue what, students? They will then have to get the prior approval from the higher authority, and on that basis they can give the notice to any person requiring from them the information. Now as it goes, students, this notice, I have told you that it can be given to any person. It can also be given to the officer of the banking company. So to the officer of the banking company also this particular notice can be given, and the bank primarily they would be under the obligation to give these particular evidences. Now if there is any default in compliance with this particular notice, then rupees 100 per day penalty would be imposed. Rupees 100 per day penalty would be imposed in this regard. So that is what this section 133 suggests in this particular context. After that, students, there is section 131 as well. And so far as 131 is concerned, you will talk about the summons, students. This is all about what? Issuing the summons or giving the commissions. Issuing the summons and giving the commissions. So issuing the summons and giving the commission is about section 131. As per section 131, students, as per section 131, what happens is that by giving the summons or issuing the summons or by giving the commissions, they can students, be careful on this point as well, they can call for any information. They can again call for any information from any person. So one will say that, sir, then in that case 133 and 131 look similar. Yes, it appears to be similar. However, there is a notable difference in 131 power and 133A. 133. Students, in 131 they can enforce the attendance of the person also. In 131 they can enforce the attendance of the person, which is otherwise not possible in 133. Point number 2, they can also call for the books of accounts. They can also call for the books of accounts primarily, and during the appearance of that person who is appearing primarily, and this person, I am telling you students, he is not necessarily the assessee to whom the summons are being given. Again, as I have told you, the summons of 131 can be issued to any person. It can also be to you also in some of the cases. If they think that statement from you can be considered to be relevant. Now, one thing which is very critical in 131 is that whenever a statement has been taken in 131, when you go there and you have to give the statement, whenever statement has to be given in 131, that statement has to be under the oath. Under the oath, which therefore implies that those statements can be taken as an evidence. Other point, students, in this particular section, students, other point in this particular section is that, as I have told you, students, the other point in this particular section is that the books of accounts also have to be furnished. The books of accounts also has to be furnished, and the books of accounts that has to be furnished, students, if that can be impounded, this section 131 has the power given to the officer to impound the books of accounts. Impounding of the books of accounts can be done, students, and that can be done for a period of 15 days, 15. And if they want to get an extension beyond 15 days, then for that they need to get the approval from the higher authority. If they want to get an extension beyond 15 days, then for that they need to get an approval from the higher authority, and that is what 131 is all about. 133A, students, is about the survey provision, and 133B is also a limited survey, or 133B is also very popularly known as door-to-door survey. Limited survey or a door-to-door survey. What is that particular point? We will look into it. Let's have a look quickly on this particular part, students. So I'll just try to put across to 133 first in this context. Now in this context over here, power to call for information. Power to call for the information, if you see over here, in this context, AO, assessing officer, deputy CIT may exercise such power in this context. Power, they can be exercised in this context. Now, what they have said over here, students, is that in this context, however, when no proceeding is pending, students, if no proceeding is pending, then what? With the prior approval of the DIT or CIT, AO may exercise such power. So as I told you, students, if no proceedings are pending, then in that scenario you need to then take the approval of the higher authority. If the proceeding is pending, then in 133 you can go ahead and give this particular authority. You can just simply go ahead and exercise this particular power to call for the information. Power to call for the information. Now, as I told you, students, this point is an important one. From any person you can call for the information, including what? Including the bank or the officer thereof. So from any person you can call for the information, including the bank or the person thereof, and that is exactly what you can deal in this particular regard. That is how you can deal in this particular regard, and this is how the things has to be considered. Fine, students. Now, so any person including the bank or the officer, so information, matter or account useful for the proceeding of the act. Now, how about the penalty? What about the penalty under section 272A? So here the penalty, students, is in respect of rupees 100 every day. Rupees 100 every day. The penalty under section 272A will be levied. In this context, the penalty under section 272A will be levied at rupees 100 per day. Okay, so that is what this particular penalty of 133A would be all about. Now, if you see a point above 131, which I was talking about it, the summons 131. So here again AO can also exercise this power, isn't it? Compel production of books of accounts, issue summons, and enforce attendance of a person. okay, and can impound the books for 15 days. So if you want to import the books for more than 15 days, prior permission of the Chief Commissioner is required. Here, if there is any default on the part of the person to whom the notice has been given, the default is there about the compliance, then the penalty of rupees 10,000 would be slapped on that other person who has made the default. So that is how it has to be considered in this context. Coming on the survey part, there is one very administrative amendment on survey which you should just keep an eye upon. An administrative amendment, student, on the survey part. 133A, power of survey, students, if you can see over here. Authority to survey in case where the information is received from the prescribed authority. Please have a look what they have said. Authority to survey in case where information is received from the prescribed authority. However, authority below JCIT, JDIT shall take a prior approval from JCIT and JDIT. In other cases, now please be very careful. You'll say, sir, who is the prescribed authority from whom the information has been received? Can be, say, CBDT, or say from the investigation wing, so CBI. So if from them the information has been received, primary, and the authority below the JCIT and the JDIT wants to exercise this particular power, then they need to take the prior approval from the JCIT or JDIT. They need to take the prior approval from the JCIT or JDIT. However, as they have said it, students, in any other case, then the authority below JCIT and JDIT shall take the prior approval of DIT or CIT in this regard. So in this situation, students, what will happen in that case would be that below this particular authorities, the approval will then go to whom? To the JCIT, to the CIT and the DIT, as the case may be. Any other case, students. You say, sir, what is any other case? Any other case means other than those from which the prescribed authority, from where the prescribed authority would be giving their particular, this thing. So other than the prescribed authority, supposingly there are any other source from where the information has been received by the income tax authority who is a rank below JCIT or JDIT, and they want to go for the survey for the in consequence of, they want to go to do a survey in consequence of the information which is there in their possession, then for that purpose now they will have to now take the approval from whom? From the DIT or the CIT, as the case may be. For that now they need to take the approval from the DIT or CIT, as the case may be. Fine, students. Area of survey. Let's look upon to this particular part quickly. Survey provision, students. Area of survey. So which are the areas where the survey can be done? So area of survey, students, over here. So any place within the limit of the area assigned to the income tax authority. Generally, the income tax authorities are being issued the jurisdiction on the basis of the area. That is how generally the jurisdictions are being given. Point number B, any place occupied by any person in respect of whom. So this is a case wherein the jurisdiction has been given on the basis of the person, not the area. So where the jurisdiction has been given on the basis of the person and not on the basis of the area, students, in that particular case, 133A, students, 133A says what? That the survey that shall be taken up in this regard, the survey shall be taken up in this regard, students, will be any place which is occupied by whom? By this person. Any place which is occupied by this particular person in respect of whom the income tax authority is exercising the jurisdiction. In respect of whom the income tax authority is exercising the jurisdiction. And this point number C, students, if you see, any place in respect of which the income tax authority is authorized by other income tax authority who exercise jurisdiction in respect of any person occupying such place. Any place in respect of which the income tax authority is authorized by another income tax authority who exercises jurisdiction in respect of any person occupying such place. So in this context, students, if you see over here, what it implies, any place in respect of which the income tax authority is authorized by another income tax authority who exercise jurisdiction in respect of any person occupying such place. Any person occupying such place. So in this context, students, like for example, I can give one example. Say one particular film star who is say in Mumbai. His particular case, some of the places has to be done for a survey. He has also got some place of his business in, say, in Delhi. Now, the assessing officer who is having the jurisdiction over that film star in Mumbai, this assessing officer of Mumbai can authorize the assessing officer of Delhi who has got this jurisdiction over that particular place that, look, I cannot come to Delhi, better I authorize you to undertake the survey in his particular place. So that is how this authorization can be done. Okay, so at which the business or profession, now which are the places, students? Which are the places? The places are business or profession or an activity for charitable purpose is carried on, whether such places place of principal business or not. Charitable purpose, students, and not the religious purpose. Keep that particular point in mind. So charitable purpose is only covered, religious purpose is not covered. Okay. Explanation. A place of business or profession or activity for charitable purpose shall also include what, students? So a place of business or profession or activity of charitable purpose shall also include any other place where the person states that any of his books of accounts or documents or any part of his cash or stock or any other valuable article relating to his profession or business or activity of charitable purpose are kept. So if they name any of your, say, friend's place where the books are being kept, so even your friend's place then would be considered as a place of business, as the case may be. So even that is what could be considered in this regard, in this scenario. So just keep this particular point in mind. Now comes, students, the other particular aspect of 133A. Survey in connection of any function, ceremony and function, students. Yes, you can do the survey, students, in this context. However, students, one thing which is very important is just that this sort of a survey can take place in only after such ceremony or event is over. So the power is given whereby you can go there and you can conduct the survey in all these particular places, but as I told you here in primary, at any time after such function, ceremony or event is over. So that is one of the particular unique point that you should keep in mind, students, in this context. Places not to be entered, students, herein. Okay, by the way, the time of survey, this is also a very popular question. If it is about the place of business, during the business hour, any other place, you can write here in the bracket charitable location, after sunrise, before sunset, and then place of function or ceremony or the event. Then what they have said, any time after such function or ceremony or the event. So only after the completion of those events that the survey can be done. Place which cannot be entered, students. This is an important one. Where SSC do not carry on business or the business in residential premises of the third party students. So if in the case of the COVID scenario, and if there is a work from home culture which has been there, and I'm working from my own particular place, my own home, I'm doing my work. Now this has become like a kind of my business, a business place. So if it has become a business place, students, then in that situation, can it be undertaken in my home? And the answer is yes. So that they can do it, because now this is a business which I am doing in the residential premises. Whose residential premises? My own. Okay, then you'll say, sir, in that case everyone's home would be under the survey. Yes, students, that's risk is always there, but at least a safeguard is there that the prior approvals has to be taken from the higher authority. Obviously, this information is not going to come from the prescribed authority like CBDT or CBI or these kind of a person. So if any income tax authority below the rank of the CIT, he wants to undertake the survey, then he will have to take the approval from the CIT as the case may be. So that is the reason why that is the only safeguard which is available, which we can say in this regard. Now students, if you see further over here, right of the authority, what are the rights of the authority, students, in this context? Inspect books of accounts, place identification mark or make the extract therefrom, seize and retain the books for 15 days. However, for more period, reasons in writing and prior approval from Chief CIT. Same case 131. Just what we have seen in 131 is also available over here as well. What we've discussed in section 131 equally applies in this particular case as well. Duty, students. Now, duties of the person. Now, in the context of the duties of the person, students, over here, afford the necessary facility to inspect the books of accounts or verifying the cash or the stock. So, in this case, that is something that they need to do. I think that is not that important. Now we can directly come to 133B. Power to collect the information under 133B. AO or ITO for collecting the information may enter. Now be careful, students. They may enter where? In this scenario. So they may enter any place or building within the area assigned to him. Fine. So that is the kind of the limit. This is also known as limited survey or door-to-door survey. Door-to-door survey. This is the another name. Door-to-door survey. So AO or ITO for collecting information may enter any place or building within the area assigned to him, or any place or building occupied or where business or profession is carried on by a person on whom authority has a jurisdiction. So second point is about whom? Any place or building occupied or where business or profession is carried on by a person on whom authority has a jurisdiction. On whom what? The authority has a jurisdiction. So any place or building occupied herein, that is what it is. Now please see herein, entry can be made during the business hours. Can you see that? Now one very popular question is about like cyber cafe. I think cyber cafe, or one question is about the hotel. At 8 PM at night, you have entered to the hotel under 133B. Question was therefore asked that whether this entering the hotel at night at 8 PM, is it justified? And the answer is yes, it is justified, students. The reason is very clear. Why is it so? Because in this context, this is very much a business hours, and because it is a business hours, therefore you can enter into that particular point of time. However, one precaution that you need to only follow is that you cannot remove the books from such particular place. No books can be removed, students, from that particular place, and that is one point that you should always keep in mind. And last but not the least, students, there would be a penalty for the non-compliance that should be there in this regard. The penalty for the non-compliance. This students should be 10,000 rupees. This should be 10,000 rupees. The penalty for the non-compliance. Okay. So with that, students, the regular assessment and the power. Now in the case of the power, one very important point, students, I just wanted to share with all of you. Keep in mind this particular side. The power of the CBDT, students. Students, can you know that particular thing, that one particular very popular case study is there that if I file the return of income after, say, I've got a loss return, and then there is 1 day delay. I've got a loss return, students. Loss return is there, and there's a delay. Say, for example, for a day, there is a delay that has taken place, and because of that delay for a particular day also, you know what is the consequence that is going to be felt. That delay, students, even for a single day, would have a huge impact, and that impact is known to all of you now. What is the impact, students? That impact is that, student, such delay, students, something which will not enable the assessee to carry forward the losses. To carry forward the losses, the loss will get lapsed if he is filing a loss return. Now, what if there is a genuine reason or the cause for not filing the return of income for that particular due date period? What happens if there is a genuine reason for not filing the ROI within that particular due date period? What will happen in that case? So, students, in that situation, there is one important remedy which is available, and that remedy, students, that has been available has been made in terms of what, students? In terms of that you may make an application to the CBDT, and by making an application to the CBDT, you will be getting the necessary relief. However, students, there is a monetary threshold for your claims. There are some monetary threshold on the basis of which application would be given to which authority has been decided. Application would be given to which authority, students, has been decided. So if you see over here, in this case, monetary limit up to 10 lakhs, you will go to PCIT or CIT. If it is between 10 to 50 lakhs, then it is PCCIT or CIT. If it is greater than 50 lakhs, then it will go to CBDT. So these are the various threshold levels where you will go to the relevant authority and make your application. You'll go to the relevant authority and make your application. Fine, so just keep this particular thresholds in mind. So don't say that all the application will be filed to the CBDT. No, only if the monetary claims that you want to get the benefit, if it is beyond rupees 50 lakhs, that you will then go to the CBDT. If it is between 10 lakhs to 50 lakhs, then the application has to be filed before whom? The Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax or the Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. And where it is less than 10 lakhs or up to 10 lakhs, then it will go to the Principal Commissioner of Income Tax or to the Commissioner of Income Tax, as the case may be. So this is how the things has to be looked upon, students, in this context. So students, here is how the things has to be referred. Now, students, let's look upon to the other case. I'll quickly run through some other particular powers which I've given you in the chart itself. The students, what happens generally is that once the assessment starts, he gives a notice to the assessee, and once he gives a notice to the assessee, in that particular case, what happens is that the books are being filed, books are being thereafter being filed. Sometimes, or may I say many a times, the nature of the business is of the assessee is so complex that it requires an expert or an expert guidance to finally do a justice to the assessment, to finally do what? A justice to the assessment. For example, students, if I have to say in this regard, just pay attention. For example, if you see very carefully, in the context of what? In the context of, students, the assessing officer, in the context of the assessing officer who is herein having a particular case of a stockbroker. I always give this example of a stockbroker because I myself have been the victim in my articleship doing the audit of a stockbroker. And what a fun that these clients have made of all our article guys, because we could not understand even a single stuffs and all. I still remember those days. So an assessing officer having a particular case of an assessee who is a stockbroker, again a very complex case. Now this AO himself will not have any expertise to deal with it. So what he will do, students, in that case, the first recourse, the recourse that is available to the assessing officer to do a scrutiny of those particular cases is he may make an application, students. He may make an application before whom? Application he should be filing before the JCIT. The JCIT, students, and that application should be filed under section 144A. That application should be filed under section 144A. The JCIT, students, is a domain expert. The JCIT is a domain expert. So therefore, being a domain expert, he will be in a better position. He will be in a better position to really appreciate the case, and on that basis he will give his inputs or his finding or his direction to the AO, who would be under the obligation students, to accept that particular direction as it is. He then cannot apply his mind. So once the JCIT gives his direction to the assessing officer, the AO will lose any right, or you can say the AO will lose any liberty to take any other viewpoint other than the direction that has been given. Secondly, students, under 144A, that section, the JCIT can give this direction even suo motu. Suo motu means through on his own self he can give this particular direction. So either the direction can be given through an application made on this behalf, or the direction can be done even in a suo motu case, students. Through a suo motu, the direction can be given. And last but not the least, students, if the SSE has made the application, before this particular officer, then in that case also the direction can be given. Even in that case also, students, the direction can be given. So these are the various thresholds where the direction, students, could be given in this regard. These are the various particular cases where, or situations where, the direction. So it can be either through the application of the AO, or it can be a suo motu, or it can be through the application made by the SSE. In either of the case, whenever a direction has been given by the JCIT to the AO would be under the obligation to accept that particular direction as it is. He cannot take any other recourse. But supposingly, students, there is no such assistance of the JCIT which is available. If I don't have any such JCIT, a domain expert, who can give me such direction, then what is the remedy which is available to me? So in that situation, students, I can then go for a special audit. However, students, before the fact that in special audit, students, you all know, for that purpose the AO will have to make an application before the commissioner, and the commissioner will then give the direction to whom? For the special audit. But please be careful of one point, that the cost of the special audit, students, has to be borne by whom? The cost of the special audit, students, has to be borne by whom? It has to be borne by the Government of India. And that is the reason why the CIT does not want to give the direction at the very outset. The CIT does not want to give the direction at the very outset. So what the CIT will do in that case, students, he will try to go for a transfer of the case to another AO. So this is what section 127 is all about. So here there is a case of a transfer wherein from one AO he can transfer the case to another AO. From one AO he can transfer the case to another AO. Now, students, if that another AO to whom the case is transferred, if he is in the same city, then there is no requirement of giving an opportunity of being heard. Then there is no requirement to give an opportunity of being heard. But if he happens to be of some other city, different city, then the AO, then before doing the transfer, the CIT will have to give the SSE an opportunity of being heard, and that exactly how it has to be considered. Fine. So this is how the things will be looked upon in terms of this. But if you say that no, sir, there are no such other AO who is available, who is having an expertise or good domain knowledge of the stockbroker, then even now the CIT will be helpless. But he will not have any other option, but to give the direction for what, students? Direction for the special audit. Now at this stage he will have got no option but to give the direction for what? For the special audit. And now students, when they give the direction for special audit, there are some procedures that you should always keep in mind. Even for the special audit case, students, there are some procedures that you should always keep in mind. And what is the procedure? So in the case of the special audit, see herein, so students, AO, he will have the opinion that the books are complex and it is prejudicial books are complex and prejudicial to the interest of revenue. Prejudicial to the interest of revenue. So he will give the, in this case, first he need to give the SSE OBH, full form of OBH is opportunity of being heard. You need to give to the SSE an opportunity of being heard. Now in that scenario, students, so give the SSE an opportunity of being heard. Then thereafter, special auditor direction will be given. Special audit direction is given. Then special auditor shall submit his report within 180 days. And students, here also there is an important point. That is, before using the special audit report, comma, before using the special audit report, comma, AO shall give to the SSE OBH. Again, OBH full form is opportunity of being heard. And here, students, the order of assessment shall be passed. Before using the special audit report, comma, AO shall give to the SSE opportunity of being heard. So this opportunity of being heard, students, also has to be given at this point of time. Just be very clear on this particular part as well. So at 2 point of time in the special audit direction under 142(2)(a, that the opportunity of being heard has to be given. One before giving the direction of a special audit and another before passing of the order of assessment. So at this 2 point of time that the special audit direction should be given. So just keep this particular point in mind, students. Fine. Now with that, if you all are through with this one, all of you, we come towards our special assessment. So this was what I have told you in my previous lecture. assessment is of two type, regular assessment 143 and 144. So we have now seen all the powers as well. While discussing about the assessment, we have also seen the power of the income tax authority. Now in the special assessment, the first one, students, is the 147, which is income escaping assessment, and another assessment is about 153A, the assessment in consequence of the search. So these are the two special assessment which is there. One is the assessment of 147 and another is the assessment of 153A. So herein 147 income escaping assessment. So here, students, if you talk about 147, the AO should have a reason to believe. The AO should have what? A reason to believe, RTB, that the income has escaped assessment subject to section 148 to section 153, subject to section 148 to 153, he shall assess such income or any other income which comes to his notice subsequently during the course of the assessment under section 147. So the AO should have a reason to believe, students, that the income has escaped assessment. Then subject to the section 148 to 153, he shall assess such income. Who shall assess such income? That is the AO shall assess such income or any other income which comes to his notice subsequently during the course of the assessment in section 147. So that is the ground in which the 147 jurisdiction operates. Students, this is the jurisdiction so far as 147 is concerned. Let's quickly run through this one by one so far as 147 is concerned. So AO has a reason to believe that any income chargeable to tax for any AY has escaped the assessment. Okay, so now there are certain explanation which has been given. So explanation to section 147, income deemed to have escaped the assessment. Now in this context, serial numbers are also being given to you. ROI has been furnished or not, even that has been mentioned. Assessment has been made. So here, students, there are some cases of the deemed, what constitute the income which is deemed to have escaped the assessment. What constitute the income which is deemed to have escaped the assessment. So these are various examples. That is simple, you can just go through the same. What is more critical, which I'll just put it across, is this one. Person found to have asset located outside India. Student, so the very fact that he has got some asset situated outside India, that is sufficient enough. That is sufficient enough to pursue 147 on such person. That is sufficient enough to pursue section 147, students, on such person. That is to say, giving the notice under 148. And in fact, after some time you will come to know the time limit is also 16 AYs. Student, that is massive. that is massive. So that is one. And second one, assessee has failed to furnish the transfer pricing report under 92E. Student, these are the classic, you can say the areas or the corners of your MTPs, the MCQs. This is where your MCQs are being targeted, students, in the examination. So you have to be very careful on this particular part so far as this is concerned. So SSC has failed to furnish the transfer pricing report under section 92E. Even this part, students, even this particular part, primary, would be considered as a income which has escaped the assessment. Now, reason to believe, students, these are the various examples which I have given it over here, like CAG audit report. Can that be relied upon for the purpose of what? For the purpose of the going ahead and doing this particular assessment? And the answer is yes. Later Supreme Court judgment, yes, students. Why? Because Supreme Court, students, does not make a law. It establishes the way the law should have been implemented. And if there is any other view that has taken in the course of implementing the law, which is contradicting the decision given by the Supreme Court, even if that decision of the Supreme Court has come subsequently, we will say and conclude that there is an income which has escaped the assessment and the AO is justified to issue the notice under section 148. Retrospective amendment in law, even that is what would be considered. Fine, friends. So this is also which would be there. Now in the exclude side, friends, if you can see opinion of CAG audit report. See, you say, sir, what is this? Point number 1. Here we are talking only about the opinion. Here is, see, it's not about this for point number 1, which is CAG audit report, which is about the, not like an opinion, it's like a statement, like true and correct, not true and fair. So those are the statements. But if it is to do with the opinion part, then obviously the opinion can differ. Now again, students, can you see this? There are 2 case laws, very important case laws. Skyline Hospitality, on the basis of the reason to believe. In this case, students, the income tax department or the assessing officer has relied upon to the tax evasion report which has been received from the investigation unit. So the director in income tax investigation, from that DIT investigation, they have received the tax evasion report. So students, whether the tax evasion report so received from the investigation unit, can that be relied upon for the purpose of issuing the notice under section 148? And the answer is yes. Definitely, students, that can be relied upon. The other point, students, which has been there is the Godrej Industries Limited Bombay High Court judgment. Here, students, is about the case of subsequent amendment of law with retrospective effect. Subsequent amendment of law with retrospective effect cannot validate the notice issued on different grounds. Okay, now in that context, first of all, this is a bit like, what is the situation? I'll just let you know. First of all, just now we have concluded that a retrospective amendment of law, that can be the basis of reopening. So if there is a retrospective amendment of law and based on that, it is being concluded that the income of the assessee has escaped the assessment, then definitely, students, that can be made as a basis of the reopening the case. No harm in that. But please pay attention to this particular point. If I have already reopened the case of the assessee, on some other ground, and during the meantime, there is a subsequent retrospective amendment which has been made, which establishes that the income of the assessee for that AVA has escaped the assessment. But the point is this: can I now, in order to defend my proceedings which I have initiated on some other ground, can I defend my proceedings on the basis of this particular subsequent event, which is the retrospective amendment of law which came into account while the proceeding was going on under 147? Can that be made as the basis of my defense to the proceedings which I have initiated but on some other ground? Can I use this as a defense? And the answer is no. I cannot use this particular defense, students. And that exactly what this Godrej Industries Limited Bombay High Court is saying. Important case law. This is also, these are the ICI case laws, and this has not been targeted in the examination up till now. So just keep an eye on this particular case law. Then students, what did I told you in this context? So it was being said that the AO should have a reason to believe that the income has escaped assessment. Then subject to section 148 to 153. Students, subject to section 148 to 153. Now all of you will pay attention exactly what this section is all about in this context, students. So here in students, can you see this particular point? See, what they are suggesting over here is that the notice under 148 can be served only after the reasons are recorded in writing. The notice under section 148 can be served only after the reasons are recorded in writing. Below this, if you see, reasons to be disclosed to the SSE is only after filing of the return in response to the notice under section 148, and he has demanded such reason. Students, first of all, as the first step goes, because please understand, the provision is subject to what I have made you write, subject to the provision of section 148 to 153. So the proceedings under section 147 has been made as subject to section 148 to section 153. So the first and the foremost thing in section 148 is that the notice primarily has to be given. The notice has to be given, students. That is the first and the foremost point. Fine. So the notice under 148 has to be given. Now, if you are giving the notice under section 148 primarily, that is the first and the foremost point. Then in that situation, then students, in that particular situation, once you give this particular notice, thereafter, what is the next particular situation that will come into play? Thereafter, students, in this context, once you give this particular notice, the next particular point is that this notice is essentially for requiring the SSE to file the ROI. This notice is essentially requiring the SSE to file the ROI for the relevant AY. Before he issues the notice, he needs to record his reasons. Before he issues the notice, he needs to record his reasons in the departmental record. The question to all of you is this, that whether the reasons which has been recorded in the departmental record is that particular reasons that needs to be disclosed in the notice itself, whether I should write it that reasons in the notice itself, and the answer is no. If you disclose the reasons in the notice itself, then this will have an impact on the proceedings. This will definitely have an impact on the proceedings. So therefore, you are not required to disclose the reasons in the notice itself. At this stage, you are not allowed to do that. Fine, students. Thereafter what? Thereafter, students, once the notice has been given, primarily SSE will have to file the return in response to the notice. Okay. Again, I'm repeating, in the notice you are not going to disclose the reasons. Okay. So once the notice has been given, the SSE will file the return in response to the notice of section 148. After the SSE has filed that particular return, this return would be known as return filed in response to the notice of 148. After he has filed the return, if the SSE still demands for the reasons, then I want to know what was the reasons which prompted you to give me the notice under 148. At this stage, now he needs to disclose his particular cards. He now needs to disclose his reasons. And if at this particular point of time, if he does not disclose the reasons, then his entire proceedings will become invalid. His entire proceedings will become invalid. This is the precaution that he needs to take into account. Did you all got this one? Just keep this particular point in mind, students. Now, what is the time limit of the notice? Students, as I told you, the proceedings under section 147, the proceedings under section 147 has been made as being subject to the procedure of 148 to 153. So whatever is the mandatory procedure from section 148 to section 153 has to be complied. So if you see very carefully over here, students, the time limit which has been given for issue of notice, please have a look to the time limit over here. So we have got in this context, time limit for issue of notice under 148. So please have a look over here, the chart. If the escaped income is up to rupees 1 lakh, then 4 years from the end of the relevant AY. 4 years from the end of the relevant AY. Now we will see about this part as well, the second box, but let's see the third box first. The third one. If the income in relation to the asset is located outside India, as I told you, in this case, because that is a deemed to have been escaped the assessment, isn't it? Then it would be 16 years from the end of the relevant AY. Quite a long period, isn't it? Pay attention on this one now. Where the income chargeable to tax, where amounts to or amount likely to be minimum how much? 1 lakh. So where the income which is chargeable to tax has escaped the assessment, students, and it amounts to minimum rupees 1 lakh. Minimum rupees 1 lakh. Then students, in this case, the escapement would be for 6 years from the end of the relevant AY. It would be 6 years from the end of what? Relevant AY. So that is how it would be considered in this context. Now, do we have any exception where even for that 6 years period I cannot issue the notice? And this is very important, students. Best pay attention to the first proviso. And what it says, where the assessment has been made earlier under section 143 or under 147, then no notice after 4 years from the end of 4 years, students, from the end of the relevant AY, if following conditions are satisfied. Now, which are the following conditions, students, in this context? So the following condition that they are mentioning is that the assessee should have filed the return of the income for that particular AY. Means for that original AY, the return should have been filed. So assessee has filed the ROI which he was required to furnish under any provision of the Income Tax Act, that is 139. For that AY he has already filed, plus what he has fully and truly disclosed, students. Fully and truly disclose in this scenario, students. He has fully and truly disclosed all the material facts necessary for assessment. Assessee has fully and truly disclosed all the material facts necessary for assessment. So that is very critical, students, in this context. That is very critical in this particular context. So if he has fully and truly disclosed, from his side he has made all the disclosure, all the material facts which is necessary for the assessment, then the assessing officer cannot go beyond 4 years from the end of the relevant AY, students. 4 years from the end of the relevant AY. And that exactly is the point. So students, this is how the things has to be looked upon. Now come to the exception. So this is where this entire point is all about. So in the examination, students, you may be getting a question. In the examination, students, you may be getting a question. And what exactly is the question? Herein, students, in the case of the time limit which has been mentioned over here, So there are certain exceptions. So as we all know that the 4 years from the end of the from the relevant AY, you cannot issue the notice under section 148 if the following two conditions are satisfied. That is, again I'm repeating, for that particular AY you already have filed the return of income under 139(1), and second one is that the assessee has fully and truly have disclosed all the material facts which is necessary for that particular assessment. Now below this, student, there are certain exceptions to the time limit which we will look into it. Now what is this exception to the time limit? That is to say that the notice can be issued at any time, meaning thereby if there is a case of say 2001 and I have to issue a notice in 2021. So today 2021, if I have to issue the notice in respect of an AY for say 2001, I can still issue the notice if that notice is in consequence of, the notice is in consequence of, or the notice is to give the effect of the findings of the direction of any court. So if that notice which I am giving it, if that is in consequence of or to give the effect of the finding of the direction of any of the court, then in that particular case, that notice which has been there will be considered to be valid. So that is one thing which has been there, which is given in section 150. No time limit for issue of notice, notwithstanding anything contained in section 149. A notice under 148 may be issued at any time for the purpose of making the assessment or reassessment if it is in the consequence of or in order to give the effect of the finding or direction contained in any particular code. So this is one thing that you should always keep in mind, that if this is one of the questions that can also be there in the examination, that whether this notice which has been issued in consequence of what, in consequence of or to give the effect of the finding of any court, if the notice has been given in 2021 for the AY 2001, then whether that notice will it be considered to be valid, and the answer is yes. Next particular point, students, is this is one of the attempt they have asked one question which is about with whom the sanction that the AO needs to take up if he wants to give the notice under 148. Knowing the fact that this is a special assessment, there is special protocol that has to be followed, and one of the protocols that has to be followed is to get the sanction from the higher authority before pursuing the proceedings under 147. So in that case, students, 151 says sanction of notice under 148. Now if you are giving the notice up to that 4 years from the end of the relevant AY, and the one who is giving the notice is a person who is below the rank of JCIT, if he is a person who is below the rank of JCIT, then you need to take the approval from the JCIT. This is when, students, when you are giving the notice within that 4 years from the end of the relevant AY, then in that situation, if the person who is giving the notice is below the rank of the JCIT, then he needs to get this particular he needs to get the permission from the JCIT or the sanction from the JCIT. Whereas if the notice is given after 4 years, then, students, anyone who gives the notice, they will have to take the permission from the CIT. They will have to take the permission from the CIT. So this is one of the points that should also be borne in mind. So again, I'm repeating this particular proposition, and that is about if the notice has been taken, notice has been given within that 4 years period, then you need to take the approval from whom? From the JCIT in this case. And whereas if the notice is given after 4 years, then the approval mandatorily is required from whom, friends? From the CIT. Okay, so that is one of the point that should be borne in mind. Now, students, dropping the assessment, this is for theory. You can write therein that this particular question is targeted for theory part, that can the proceedings under 147, can that be dropped, and the answer is yes. So if the assessee can show that he is already being assessed on an income which is on a higher side, okay, so if he can show to the AO that he has already been assessed on an income which is on the higher side, primarily, then in that case, like I keep on giving one very classic example to keep in mind. Supposingly this assessee has gone with the presumptive income. If he has taken the presumptive income route, and say for example he has shown the turnover of 60 lakhs, he has shown the turnover of how much? 60 lakhs. So generally what is the situation? 8% of the gross receipt is what we generally say, we generally offer. But this particular associate has offered, say, not at 8%, but he has offered at 12% of 60 lakhs, which therefore comes to 7.2 lakhs, which therefore comes to how much? 7.2 lakhs. Now with 7.2 lakh students, with this 7.2 lakhs, which is the income which I have offered, and I have paid the tax, whatever it comes to. So I have offered in my tax return on the turnover of 60 lakhs, the rate which I have applied was 12% on that 60 lakhs. That is what is the rate which I have applied. Now subsequently, students, please pay attention now. Subsequently, what has happened is that the AO witnessed that the actual turnover is not 60 lakhs, it is 80 lakhs. And therefore, he then reopens the case. So in this situation, students, if he then reopens the case, then in this scenario, what will happen in this context? If he reopens the case, then in that scenario, students, that he will say that 8% you have shown at 60 lakhs, but your case is at 80 lakhs. The gross receipt it is at 80 lakhs. So please be careful, students. One thing, in that situation, the 8% of the gross receipt, the 8% of what? Of the gross receipt is what should have been the income, which comes to 8% of 60 lakhs, 7.2 lakhs. 8% of 60 lakhs, 7.2 lakhs. And therefore, in this regard, students, you should then take up the rate at 12%. So what the assessee will say is this, that look, you have taken at 8%, but my case I have already offered at 12%. So it means that if supposedly I take 80 lakhs as a gross receipt, how much is the income that I should have shown? How much is the income that I should have shown? I should have shown the income at how much? 6.4 lakhs. 80 lakhs into 8%. 80 lakhs into 8%, so it should be 6.4 lakhs. Isn't it? So in that context, if 80 lakhs into 8%, which is at 6.4 lakhs, is what should have been the income. Is what should have been what students? The income. 6.4 lakhs is what should have been the income. But I have offered at 7.2 lakhs. I have offered the what? 7.2 lakhs. And therefore, in that context, 7.2 lakhs students is what would be considered in this regard. 7.2 lakhs is what would be considered in this regard. Did you all got this one, students? Fine. So that is how it would be considered. Now, students, the remaining part which has been there, I'll be putting up in the next, because this is the most critical part, and this is based on the case laws. Like during the pendency, what is the scope? I will just touch upon the case law base primarily in the next particular lecture, which has been there. But we will discuss those particular situation in the case law primarily in this context. There are case laws which are being there. So we'll discuss this in the next class, and then we will proceed towards what? Proceed towards the entire aspect of this particular case. Let's try to take up in the next class. I'll just do it in the next session quickly on this particular part. See you then.